Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, bring the meeting back into session. In open session, we just spent about 35 minutes in executive session discussing security items related to the school district. And at this time, we will return to our regular meeting. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to be heard on any issues tonight for public input? Seeing none. Next, we move to our student report, and I believe we have a new student representative tonight, Emma Hoey.
Emma's been here before.
Yeah, once before.
Emma's been here
at
once
the
before.
Batchelder School.
I'm really...
I remember Emma, she did a
Last
tremendous
week I
job.
called our student the wrong name. Tonight, I forgot that Emma was here.
Emma's been here before.
I'm getting older,
Don't worry,
I'm sorry.
it's okay.
So we have Emma Hoey here. Emma?
Yes, so for the student report, Xanadu was performed by the Maskers Club on January 31st. February 1st, 7th, and 8th was a great hit, and the final night was nearly sold out. Model United Nations had a successful trip to Boston. The boys and girls varsity basketball has their senior night tonight. The girls was at 5:30 and the boys was at 7. Both are playing Saugus tonight. And the girls lost in triple overtime against Pentucket their last game.
Oh, against Pentucket.
Yeah.
Oh.
Varsity hockey lost on Friday, but they did win Saturday, putting them in first place for Cals. The wrestling lost on Saturday, which was their first loss in 2 years. The Student Council held a senior citizen luncheon with Peabody Court. They set up food, silverware, and decorations. It was very well attended. About 20 people came to eat a nice hot lunch. On Wednesday and Thursday, Mr. Bernard and Mr. LaPrette will be holding assemblies during school for NEASC, and student representatives will also be presenting. The blood drive is tomorrow for 16 years and older participants of the high school, also teachers included. Over 60 students and teachers have already signed up. It will be in the high school gymnasium beginning at 8 a.m. and running all day. Samantha's Harvest is also selling carnations in the lobby for this week for Valentine's Day. And varsity cheerleading placed second at their CALS competition and are moving on to regionals. The juniors this week and last week received their course selection sheets for next year, and they'll meet with their guidance counselors to discuss. And the quarter 2 report cards were mailed home Thursday. I would like to share with you a chemistry lab that we did for honors chemistry. And it's a hydrate lab, so what we did was we evaporated hydrates out of the copper sulfate solution and made a new solution.
It's right up Mr. Venezia's alley.
Oh,
He's
good.
a science expert.
It looks like just the way I would have done it.
There are pictures that
Yeah,
are being
thank God.
Any questions for Emma? Now, Emma, what year are you in?
I'm a sophomore.
So I asked, we were at the middle school for our last meeting, and I was asking the students what they're thinking about in terms of the new high school. As it gets so much closer to being finished, just curious, like what you and your classmates are talking about and what the excitement level is. for the new
We're
school.
really excited. It looks so nice. Like, you see it every day passing by, and like you just can't wait to get up there. I mean, our old school is a little outdated, so we're really looking forward to going up there soon.
You're not just saying that to make us feel good, right?
No, I mean it.
Yeah, it is really great, and we were talking earlier, the construction, the quality of the construction is great, the different spaces, the classrooms are huge.
It's just gonna be fun being there.
I know.
I think
The
fun is
gym.
important.
Yeah, I think it will be
The
fun.
gym is huge, the auditorium is huge, everything is big, compared to
Yeah.
what we're in now, and it's gonna be so easy to find your way around, so.
Oh, good.
Did you
Won't get
correct
lost.
this yourself?
No, my teacher did.
Really?
Yes.
All right. Well,
It's very good.
check marks and,
My seat's kinda sunk down here.
double check for me, Cliff, it looks accurate.
All right. Any other questions for Emma? Okay, thank you.
Do you have a career choice yet?
I don't, but I'm thinking about law. I joined the mock trial club at school.
think
We
it does.
won our last 2 matches on the defense side of our case.
Oh, nice.
Mhm.
Is that against other schools, or?
Yeah, other high schools, we go to the Salem District Courthouse, and we go against them there.
I like that, that's a nice courthouse.
Yeah, it is.
And how many times during the year will you do that?
We have 3 trials, and we do 2 for defense and 1 for plaintiff, or maybe the opposite next year.
Nice.
Do you get any guidance from home on that area?
Yeah, actually, my dad helps coach.
Great. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you.
Thank
See you in
you,
a couple
Emma.
weeks, or a couple meetings. Thank you. Okay, next, continued business. And as always, our first item is an update on the new school project. Superintendent Willis?
Yes, the last secondary school building committee meeting was held on February 28th, beginning at 5:30 PM. Unfortunately, I went home ill, so I'm going to ask Mr. Venezia to give an update of the secondary school building committee, and I'm sure that Mr. Bowers and Mrs. Imbriano will be able to round out the report.
It was actually a brief meeting. I think it was like 29 minutes long. So we had an update from Gil Bain, a design update, and pretty much we're moving along on schedule. The Classroom A building has made a lot of progress. The hung ceilings are in. They're actually starting to drop lights in, getting ready to put the ceiling in. Cliff, I don't know if I'm correct in calling this baseboard, but the heating units are now installed along the walls in all the classrooms on all 3 levels. They're doing a lot of cleanup in there, which indicates to me they're getting ready to start doing some finish work. The atrium area is pretty much all done, painted, finished. A lot of work going on in the auditorium. I go through every Saturday, and they've had crews in there every Saturday, particularly electricians. A lot of progress being made in the auditorium with the catwalk, with the electrical, the sound system. The gymnasium is again progressing. They're putting up a lot of wallboard. The media center, same thing. Everything's defined, very clearly defined. I mean, every space is defined at this point in time. Every closet, every bathroom, every breakout area. The outside is very close to finished. I mean, the only thing really lacking in the outside of the doors, and they don't put the doors in because they're still using that to get stuff in and out of the building. But other than the gymnasium, I think all the glass is now installed. And the roof is being finished. They're putting the roof soffits on all around the building. It's really, really coming along. And I'd ask, Cliff and
You know
follow
that
up.
we're getting nearer the end when the last floor to be completed is the 0 level, the first lowest level in the.
That's a little
academic
behind
wing.
the other 2 levels.
And they're painting the walls there, so.
Yeah. I'll add this.
Ceiling grids are going in.
Yeah.
The trim on all of the curtain walls is going in. The bridge has glass in it.
The bridge has
both
glass in it. Now it's
sides.
enclosed.
The chillers are in
Chillers and
place.
the cooling tower are in, and that was huge. I mean, the chillers they're gigantic. I mean, they're really impressive.
Big ugly machine.
Yeah, yeah. Down with all the other ugly machines too, the pumps and the boilers and the hot water heaters.
Those
and-
poor machines.
I
Yeah.
know, they were so judgmental.
Really the most beautiful room in the, well, of course, I'm a piping guy, so, but the most beautiful room in the whole place is the hot water heat pump. And Janine will-
It's the eye of the beholder. For me, it's the gym. For me, it's the gym. I mean, for Cliff, it's the hot water.
If you haven't seen it, or you would understand what I mean. It is beautiful.
It's fascinating.
Unfortunately, it's all gonna get covered up with
Yeah.
insulation, and you're not
Right.
gonna see it.
But you know what? For the layperson, that area of the building is fascinating when you get down there because all the mechanical equipment is there. And you get an idea of the complexity of the heating system, the plumbing, the HVAC. I mean, there's just the pipes and the wires and everything. I mean, if everything works when it's all done, I'll say, to me, it would be a miracle, but to them, it's just routine, so.
The complexity is huge. One of the things, we had some photos that were circulated through email today that Jeff Simons has taken. And one of the comments I had, someone commented back to him, one of the comments that I almost put out and then didn't decide I wouldn't extend my neck quite that far, but I'll do it here.
Not an
in
election
public.
year.
The thing that is missing from the photos is the quality of the product we're getting. It's
that's great.
high quality in everything, not fancy, but highest quality, and the construction is fantastic. The quality of construction, they're putting it together just right. It's being done by professionals, and they're doing a great job.
And I'll say this too, Cliff, you can really start to appreciate the overall design, because this was a fairly complex project to take and build a new high school, to take the old middle school, to connect the 2 schools with all of these common areas that they're going to be utilizing, and it really, when you get in there and you see it, you say, wow, this really worked. I mean, it was hard to visualize exactly how it was going to work, but it worked. I mean, they've tied those two buildings in unbelievably. The other thing that we did approve, I think there was a series of small change orders. I forget the amount, but I think it was a net $30,000 or something like that for the change orders. They weren't anything significant. And we didn't approve any invoices 2 weeks ago. So that was pretty much the gist of the meeting, I think. I don't know if Janine has anything else beyond that.
No, well, just on the school, I believe they're getting ready to tile the bathrooms and the kitchen.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really shape. I tell you, it's really taken shape. It really
One of
is.
the big things that's happened in the last 2 weeks is the curtain wall which is the windows
Yeah.
in the media center.
Yeah.
And they were a huge change. That really
Oh, right.
tightened the whole building up.
Right, also in the front, the Distance Learning Center, they put that grid in and that looks great now because it, like, the thing that pops when you drive by it, it's really noticeable now.
Yeah, really, really truly, there's very little left on the outside that's not complete on the actual building itself, other than the doors. And the reason they haven't done the curtain walls or the glass in the gymnasium is they're still using that as an access and egress to get stuff in and out of there. But other than that, it's pretty much done on the outside.
The next
Great.
meeting's tomorrow night, right?
The
Yep.
next meeting is tomorrow night, 5:30 PM, in the Mod Caf in the high school.
Any questions, comments? Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Patrick Daly here. He's going to give us an update on the first year of the new state educator evaluation system.
Yes.
Patrick?
I'd just like to note, while Patrick is getting set up, that, and I'd like to commend him, he has led this district forward this year on this particular initiative. He has spent a considerable amount of time working with the Department of Ed, with our working group with the teachers, with the NREA, with the implementation, also with the administration. We've all been participating in training on our professional development days, as well as on additional days, to make sure that we're moving through this implementation process in a very thoughtful and purposeful way. So I'd just like to again recognize Dr. Daly for the work he has done this year.
I think one of the things that, one of the things that we talked about when we were negotiating with the teachers to put this into place, and Dr. Daly was part of that, was the fact that we actually have a very good educator evaluation system in place prior to this. But these are the new state guidelines that we must meet, and it's a little painful for everybody because it's somewhat of a change in the way that we all do things. And it does require more time initially, obviously, for the setup and the startup. But I think from everything I've heard, people are adapting. It seems to be moving along nicely.
The focus truly is on teaching and learning.
All right, well, thank you so much. We do have we're obviously about halfway through our first year. We have a survey that we're working on with our collective bargaining group that will get more substantive feedback from all stakeholders. But so far, so good, and teachers are responding positively. There's a lot of work to it, but there's a lot to be happy with too. So I did give you a packet here tonight. I just wanted to bring us through a little bit of the big picture overview, and then also dig into some of the statistics and some of the numbers, just to understand how big this change is, and then also talk about some of the deadlines and next steps in the timeline, and then also some of the pieces that still are to come. So there's a few pieces to this tonight. So this is from, just to remind you, June 28, 2011 is when the Department of Elementary Secondary adopted the new regulations. And this is what they said they were looking for: promoting growth and development of leaders and teachers, place student learning at the center using multiple measures of student learning growth and achievement, recognize excellence in teaching and leading, setting a high bar for professional teaching status, and shortening timelines for improvement. And so I've had the opportunity to present several places around the state on this. And so this was a slide that I had in there about drinking the Kool-Aid, because the first question for me was, and I think for everyone in our district, are we doing this the right way? And out of all these initiatives that are out there, and there's so many right now going on with Common Core and Park and all these different pieces, this was done very thoughtfully and very well, and the more I learned about it, the more I felt it's far from perfect, but they've been thoughtful about it. And I think if you ask educators, administrators, teachers across the state, this is something that did need some reform and some change, and I think teachers really do feel so much value in a quality educator evaluation system that is not a dog and pony show, that is really, at the core of this is more frequent observations and more opportunities for formative feedback and growth, and really having a focus on growth. And so I do believe that the department has done a lot with presentations, with webinars to really support us in implementing this moving forward. But there's so much. That's what you'll see. There's been great opportunities for collaboration through all the arms of educator evaluation and the district determined measures, which I'll speak to. There have been great opportunities for collaboration with job alikes, others in the same positions, getting all of our physical education leaders together from all surrounding districts to really talk about how are we assessing, how are we doing work with students. So there's been a lot of opportunities that this has created. And really this is an impact for us, for every educator, to show their impact on student learning. That it's more than just what you might observe in a one classroom observation, that we can look at many pieces to see really how am I making a difference and how can I improve to make more of a difference. And as Ms. Webster said earlier, these were sort of our foundations here. Trust, there's a lot of trust already in our system with the process, and I think both sides, as we talked about this was so key. We've had in the past, though, a great qualitative system with an emphasis on growth. A lot of districts didn't have that in the past, and we really did have a great system. We already had a system that had a portfolio and a binder component to it. And we've already had in many of our schools a culture of walkthroughs. Principals are very visible in their buildings. So it's not unusual for the students or for the teachers to have teachers in their buildings. So we had a very good place to start with, as was mentioned earlier. But we're building on that, and we're in there a lot more frequently than ever before, which is great. So here are some of the statistics. So this year, 2013-14, 50% of our educators are in the new model system. By next year, we will have 100% of the teachers in there. Keep in mind that the teachers who are not in there this year are finishing up the old cycle. There are two different kinds of evaluators, supervising and primary evaluators. And our supervising evaluators, these are just some of the duties, just so you can understand. The primary evaluator is it's always going to be the building principal. That's the person who's signing off on the educator's plan, who's signing off on the summative rating of the educator. There's only a few instances where it's not the building principal. That's if a teacher is assigned to multiple buildings. And I think I'm the only person who is in that role with a few teachers that are, our instrumental music teacher, for example, is at all the schools. So I am her primary. But just a few things that this person would do. The supervising evaluator guides educators through the process of self-reflection, provides them feedback on their SMART goals, conducts these 10-minute mini observations and provides feedback, conducts announced observations for first-year teachers and others as needed, assists the educators with their progress toward their SMART goals of professional practice and student learning, rating on the rubrics, district-determined measures, which are common assessments to measure growth, providing staff and student feedback in the future. They complete the formative assessments in the meetings. They complete the summative evaluations in the meetings. And then they would share all of the evidence they've gathered with the primary evaluator, who makes that final judgment and determination. So there's quite a lot that the supervising evaluator has done. And one of the pieces of this system is an educator who is in the same bargaining unit cannot be an evaluator. So anyone who is in the role of a curriculum leader at this time, we have 25 curriculum leaders and also 5 special education leaders. Those folks cannot be evaluators. So the evaluation completely falls, all these duties for supervising evaluator falls on our administrators, principals, assistant principals. When we looked at those numbers, a couple of things came out. One was a nearly great 50-50 split, so we could almost split our numbers directly in half and do a nice split for the 2 years. But we also saw that if we just assigned everybody to the principals, certain buildings would be completely overwhelmed. It would be impossible. So there's no way to do this without myself and the PPS director and the assistant PPS director taking on a few folks. So just to show you the numbers here, 2013-14, and there's an asterisk there just to say that the principals and assistant principals are also completing the former cycle for the other teachers. But you can see the high school principal with 15 educators this year, 13 next year. Assistant principal at the high school, 13, 17. Middle school, 11 and 9. Middle school assistant, 9 and 12. Batchelder, 13 and 11. Hood principal, 5 and 13. Little school principal, 11 and 10. Pretty even split. You're still a little bit heavy at the high school, but there are just more educators there. What we realized, though, if we didn't take on some other folks, these numbers would be way out of sync. So what we have is the director of PPS took on 16 this year and 6 next year. Assistant director, 16 and 5. I have 20 this year and 10 next year. And I believe this is correct, that the superintendent has all of the administrators who are licensed, and I think 11 is the correct number for there. So what we did is we were strategic, just so we're clear that the pupil personnel services took on some of the folks who were in the nursing or special education roles. I took on some of the non-traditional, so physical education, art, performing arts. So those are the folks that I supervise. So I was able to have all those folks together. When we went through the goal process, it made a lot of sense. But this is the split of the responsibility. You can see it's quite a lot of folks to do this well on the administrators. So I know that you're familiar with the process, but I just want to take a few minutes just to make sure we were all clear on this piece. There's 5 steps in the cycle. There's the self-assessment first, followed by analysis, goal setting, and plan development. Implementation of the plan, which is where we are now. We're closing in right now on the formative assessment piece for those on a 1-year plan. And then there's also a summative evaluation at the end of the cycle. All educators are evaluated on a rubric. We had the foresight, the superintendent guided us to focus. So the highlighted areas, I know this is hard to read, but basically I'm just showing you from 30,000 feet. Under each standard,
We are at 30,000 feet.
that's right.
Literally.
There's the standards. There are, under the standards are the indicators, and under the indicators, A, B, C, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, there are elements. And we dug down and we highlighted, so what you see up there in yellow, we focused on those areas. So those are the areas where teachers chose their goals, and these are the areas as teachers prepare to show us evidence that they're performing against the rubric, they're going to focus in those areas. So we have at least one element from each of the 4 standards, and there are, under these 2 areas, 1 and 2, which are the most important. If you're going to be rated proficient overall, you need to be proficient in those 2 areas. So that's where we focused the most of our attention. Another big piece of this system is moving from, being very strategic in our collection of evidence and moving away from the wheelbarrow. In the past, you may have had a binder that was 3 feet wide. The whole idea now is to really be strategic and to come up with what we call evidence that actually tells a story and really shows the student work that you've done. So you don't just want to bring in copies of, here's all the assessments I've given. What you want to say is, my goal was about really focusing and improving my assessments for those students who are struggling. And so here are some modifications I made, and really focused evidence that tells a story that may touch upon more than one of these elements. So just as an overview, there's 4 types of plans. There's developing educators for those teachers who are new to professional teaching. Also for those who are in a new role. Those are 1-year plans. There are also self-directed growth plans. There are directed growth plans, and there are improvement plans. This graphic, which I'll refer to a few times here, teachers who are professional status would be either on a 1-year self-directed growth plan or a 2-year self-directed growth plan. If a teacher needs improvement, they would be on a directed growth plan, or if they're unsatisfactory, they would be on an improvement plan. All of our teachers for this year that were professional status entered into this 2-year self-directed growth plan. This is our cycle of learning again. I'm just going to get into a little bit more detail here of the self-assessment. So the first phase of this is that educators will self-assess their performance. They'll look at student data, and they'll look at standards and indicators of effective teaching and practice. So they're really, before they come up with their goals, the teachers, their goal is to, and administrators as well, is to not only look at their role and their job and their progress towards goals in the past, but also at student data. So that, for some cases, is a bit of a shift to really focus on what the data is telling us. The next part is that they're going to develop their goals. Every educator needs to have at least one student learning and one professional practice goal. Educators are required to consider team goals, and the evaluators have final authority over those goals. And a lot of our teachers have found ways to work in teams, to connect dots, and to really work on this collaboratively, which has been wonderful. We've talked about that the goals should be SMART, specific, strategic, measurable, action-oriented, rigorous, realistic, and results-focused, and timed or tracked. Step 3 is the actual implementation of the plan. So the educator is completing the action steps of their goals. They're also collecting evidence of their outreach to families, their fulfillment of the professional responsibilities, and as well as their instruction and their subject area content. There are 3 pieces that they're collecting evidence on. So they're always looking for multiple measures of student learning. This might be student growth on assessments. This might be achievement results on assessments. Observations, which are those mini observations that we're collecting as the administrators go through the room, and also the artifacts the teachers are bringing in to show examples of learning in their classrooms. And then other additional evidence related to their performance, which is staff and student feedback, which I'll refer to in a few slides. This is just an example. We have a form that we agreed upon for observations. We've done this electronically. We've done this on paper, where we're going into the classroom and we're observing what the students are doing and saying, what the teacher's doing and saying, evidence of student learning, and then suggestions for improvement. And we also have a reflection form for the educators to reflect on their observation. And all of this is up on our professional development website also for anyone to view and see all these forms. So the fourth part, which is a very important part of the process, is the formative assessment and evaluation. And this is where we are at this stage right now. So educators are gathering their evidence, they're making progress towards their goals, and the system builds right in that you have a conference with your supervising evaluator to check in. How are we doing at this point? Is this evidence appropriate? Is it telling the story of all the work that I'm doing? How am I doing towards my goals? So for the folks that are on a 1-year plan, there's a formative assessment. For those on a 2-year plan, it's a little bit more formal. It's a formative evaluation, where you're actually checking off where they stand. If the season ended today, kind of thing, where you're checking off where they are. So for the folks on the 1-year plan, this is coming into focus around February, March, and for the folks on a 2-year plan, the evaluation is going to be closer to May. Those folks would have their summatives the following year. So the summative evaluation is when everything is, all the evidence is submitted to the evaluator, and the evaluator is making a decision. They're going to make a judgment based on multiple factors, including progress towards goals, progress against the standard, observations from their portfolios, and also the mini observations. And the evaluator is going to take all that information and make a judgment about where the educator fits onto the rating. Okay, so here's a couple of things to keep in mind. Proficient is the expected rigorous level of performance for educators. It is the demanding but attainable level of performance for most educators. And I think it's important to define proficient in this way. If you look up actually in Webster's, it's defined as well advanced in an art, occupation, or branch of knowledge. Synonyms include accomplished, ace, adept, masterly, mastered, professed, skillful. Exemplary is a little bit different than proficient, and I've mentioned this before. We do anticipate that there will not be a lot of teachers getting exemplary. We're really holding that for folks who are really at that place where they could take that skill and master it and teach it to everybody else. So proficient is where we do expect most of our educators to be.
Patrick,
Yes, sir.
maybe this is a bad analogy, but it's interesting that in this case of assessing educators, proficient is what we expect them all to be, but yet in the MCAS test, we want them all to exceed proficient. I just find that kind of interesting. I don't know if there's any connection there, but.
Yeah, we do have that MCAS definition. I mean, again, we want everyone at least proficient. We hope for advanced. I think it's the same here. We would eventually want everyone to be exemplary, but it's that idea that there's room for improvement.
But I think the interesting thing is when, at least from what I've seen, the state is basically telling us to not label anybody exemplary.
Wouldn't we look better if we just rated them all exemplary?
Well, that's what they.
Yeah, and some districts have formally said they will not be rating anyone exemplary. I think that one of the differences here is that there's pieces that are tied to exemplary down the road, and they're trying to really differentiate what those are.
But I would still hope that in our assessment of teachers, that we don't hesitate in rating someone exemplary if
Right.
they truly are
Mhm.
exemplary.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important to show to the teaching body as a whole, that
Right.
yes, there are exemplary teachers here, and you should
Mhm.
look up to those teachers and use them as an example for
Absolutely.
what you do.
And it's not a sin to have more than one.
Right.
And it's also important to note that you can be exemplary in one of the standards and not others, and you can also, being exemplary or proficient is not necessarily the sum of all, or,
Right.
you can just excel in certain pieces and get that rating. And that's where the professional judgment of the evaluator comes in.
Karen, do you have something to
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wondered, like, do our educators understand what these mean? I mean, usually when I'm doing performance reviews, people constantly ask me, what does this mean when I get it? Because I have a similar rubric that I use with
Sure.
proficiency. I'm wondering if they can operationalize that and just know what it means to them, or is it very individual?
I think we're getting there. We're doing a lot of professional development and time on this, and I think we're all learning as we go through the process. I think as we get there, I think that's, again, with the formative conversations, it's another time to kind of reinforce this and to talk about it a little bit. Hold on, it's going to get a little more complicated too. This is where, when we talk about proficient, we want everyone to be here. And if you're proficient or exemplary, you get onto either a 1 or a 2 year growth plan. We want everybody to be in the green. That's what means, that's the good place to be. And as I said, just about everyone, and actually everyone that entered the system went on to this 2 year plan. The idea here being that when you're on a 2 year plan, it's a little bit more hands off, it's self-directed, and you're on your own, checking in at a few points throughout the first year and a few points throughout the second year. That's important to note. As I mentioned earlier, there's the 4 performance standards. For teachers, you need to be proficient in curriculum planning and assessment and teaching all students in order to be proficient overall. Another piece to note for professional teacher status, in order to attain professional teacher status, the educator must achieve ratings of proficient or exemplary on each of the 4 standards and overall.
You said must, that says should. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Is should the real wording? Because
Should is the language. I said
should
must.
weakens that requirement then. If it should, that means that administrators have a way around that.
It does. And
Well, it's right
and if you kept reading it,
There's always going to be a way.
yeah, the rest of it is that you could talk to the superintendent by May 1st to make that decision. But it is this idea that, a teacher that's not performing at those levels really needs to get there. So the idea being that when a teacher achieves professional status, she has already demonstrated proficiency in all 4 areas, and that's why that focus in the next few years is really on improvement.
But my question is, why isn't it must? Why is it should and not must? Why are there exceptions?
It's just leaving a window for the administrator to talk with the superintendent for a superintendent's decision. That's my understanding of it.
If there's a particular standard that the developing teacher, remember, these are teachers that are within their first 3 years in a school district. They may be new to the profession, or they may be experienced and new to the district. But if you're new to the profession, you're expected to be proficient by the end of year 3 on all 4 standards in order to achieve what we used to call tenure.
Right.
And so I'm thinking that there's a window of opportunity here if the developing teacher is proficient in 3 out of the 4 categories and is very close in the 4th category but might not be quite proficient yet. And so the administrator, the building administrator or the supervising administrator has an opportunity to approach the superintendent about granting professional teacher status for that teacher.
I understand that. I guess personally, I just think that opens more doors than you might want to open and might set precedents that you might not want to set.
Yeah, but you also have teachers that might have shown potential, that might be mitigating or aggravating circumstances. There's all kinds of things that could come into play where you want to make an exception. The question I would have is, could you delay their professional status
Right.
based on them not
and
achieving?
you cannot, and that's
Cannot, okay.
why I think that's another
Okay,
reason
that's
why
why I
this is
said-
there. You cannot
Yeah.
buy an extra year
Right.
or for whatever reason.
So it has to be after 3 years.
Yeah,
So
and
I
so
can
s-
see, you know,
yep.
leaving some wiggle room.
Sure,
Yeah.
and some,
Lot
you know,
better to keep the process straight all the way through
Mhm.
and have a little wiggle room at the discretion of the superintendent in
Which
an
we have no
area
choice,
or
though,
if
right?
it's
No.
close.
There's no
Rather
choice.
There's no
than,
choice. It's the
rather
state's
than
telling
jury
us.
rig it so that they're proficient in all areas when they're
Exactly.
really not.
exactly.
Still better than what we had before.
Right.
So to summarize some of the professional development we've already done, the last 2 years, we really dedicated the majority of our professional development time to educator evaluation. So we spent time last October looking at an overview. We spent a lot of time digging really deep into Standard 2 of the rubrics in February, Standard 1 of the rubrics last March, and we started to overview our SMART goals last May. This fall, we went really deep in September into our self-assessment and SMART goal process in September. Soon after that, in October, we talked about part 2 of that, self-assessment and SMART goals. After that, those workshops, educators had working drafts of both their self-assessments and their goals, and we signed those plans by the deadlines that were in our contract. Everything this year was a soft deadline in year 1 as we were implementing. We just had January 10th, we did a professional development on what's called gathering evidence. And we're spending a lot of the time, February 7th, March 7th, and May 23rd, the remaining days this year, working on common assessments, working on goals, and those common assessments that we've been developing lead us towards this piece called district determined measures, which I'll talk about a little bit more. So a lot of training and time on that. In addition to that, our administrators have met above and beyond our regularly scheduled administrative meetings, 40-plus hours already for administrative training, retreats, time during the school year. We've had over 30 hours with our PD days. That's just the PD days spent on this piece. Webinars, there's webinars for educator evaluation, for DDMs, for other components of it. There's at least 10-plus hours of that. Reading through technical guides and understanding the district determined measures, 30-plus hours there. We've already spent 10-plus hours on the data training needed to understand how to turn a common assessment into a district determined measure. So lots and lots of time and hours spent on this. So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about these new components. This is makes it a little bit more complicated. This is the district determined measure piece of educator evaluation. The definition is that DDMs are defined as measures of student learning, growth, and achievement related to the math frameworks that are comparable across grade or subject levels district-wide. The measures may include, but shall not be limited to, portfolios, approved commercial assessments, and district-developed pre- and post-unit and course assessments or capstone projects. To say that an educator's evaluation would depend on her MCAS scores would be incorrect. Other states, there's a much more direct connection between state or national tests and teacher performance. We have a very different relationship here. The district determined measure is meant to put those assessments in their place. However, I'm sorry this slide jumped out there, but every educator is going to have at least two, they need data from at least 2 measures. If MCAS student growth percentile is available, then it needs to be one of the 2 measures. So that would apply to teachers in grades 4 to 8 in math or English language arts. Grade 3 is not there because there is no year's growth from grade 2 to grade 3, okay? And then grade 10 is not there at this time because there's no 9th grade assessment at this time. Administrators also would be using district determined measures, and MCAS would be one of those that would be used. And your instructional specialists, those that work with students who may be taking a retest, may be able to use that retest data to measure growth. So it needs to count for those. For the other folks that either do not have an MCAS SGP, they would choose a district determined measure of their own. So we're looking at common assessments, pre and post tests. We're looking at writing rubrics that are being scored. We're looking at performance assessments in art or in physical education, coming up with ways to score those and to talk about how students grow in 1 year's time. So this is a billboard that we made and we've presented in the past, but very important, the message we're trying to send to all educators is that the impact on student learning does not affect your summative rating. It's not about losing your job. This is about growth. So back to our little graphic here. You can see that this was the summative rating over here on this side. We've also got the student impact rating at the bottom. So in our district, we negotiated for 3 years of a trend, and we're also looking at a pattern of growth. So here is the only impact of student learning on an educator. It has nothing to do with losing your job. Here's the impact. If you are here and you're at 2-year self-directed growth plan, if for 3 years in a row you've got low scores, so the pattern is that there's 3 years of low, you would go from a 2-year plan to a 1-year plan. Still self-directed, still guided by the educator, but it's allowed to be a lot more focused. You get a lot more interaction with your administrator. You're meeting more frequently. You're getting more support. That's really what it is. And honestly, the only way that you would probably get low scores, again, the way you get a low score is that the median, it's not one student that would bring you down or one student that would bring you up. It's all of your students. The median students' growth has gone down 3 years in a row. Basically, you get them in a certain place and they go backwards for 3 years in a row. The example that comes to mind, if we had a lot of students who English was not their first language moving into a classroom or something like that, that situation might indicate why students are going, and we'd be able to focus our attention. The chances of low growth 3 years in a row, I think, are pretty slim, especially in a high achieving district like North Reading. But I think this is very important to communicate to everyone involved, but especially our educators, that all this work we're doing to create these growth measures, the impact is very minimal. The regulations call for at least 2 years. In North Reading, we've negotiated for 3. The other piece that's coming, more information to come supposedly in the late spring and summer, is about staff and student feedback. So staff would be providing feedback for administrator evaluation. Students would be providing feedback for teacher evaluation. And somehow the evidence from these surveys would be incorporated by the evaluator into the overall assessment. So more to come on that. I'm sure that will lead to some interesting discussions as this comes out and guidance comes out from the Department of Education. That was delayed for a year, so that's still on schedule to come out this spring. So a few pieces of what lies ahead. In technology, a few pieces that relate to this. We're looking to collect information and inform. So at this time, a lot of districts have entered into, when we talk about unfunded mandates and pieces that these things bring in for cost, in addition to all the costs with the professional development, the actual forms to collect being electronic is very, very helpful. We have a tremendous amount of paperwork and physical paper this year. We did decide not to go with anything electronic this year because it was so much to learn a new technology and all the new forms. But in the future, we will probably be looking for a way to streamline this process and make it a lot more efficient. We have been creative this year and used Google Forms and some other free software to help with our observations and piece, but it really will be important to look at some of those pieces in the future. We're creating electronic portfolios at this time, so it's really training teachers. I made my portfolio electronic, and I did that with the superintendent, and we've kind of built that now as a model. We're using that with teachers, so they don't need to do a physical binder. They can upload their documents and share them with the principal, and it seems to be working well. So we're doing a lot of training on those now. And a lot of, with the district-determined measures, there are opportunities to purchase district-determined measures. There's ways that we need to think about how we're going to score them and track them and measure growth by using Excel, by using different formats. So there's a lot of technology involved in trying to learn some of these pieces with these district-determined measures. A lot of professional development around common assessments, around developing rubrics, and really talking about scoring. How do we score a writing assignment and an assessment and make sure that everyone who's giving that assessment is scoring it the same way? And a lot of training and data. We've laid a good foundation with that, but really getting all teachers to understand how they're measuring growth scores with their students and what that really looks like in order to determine a growth rating. With the collective bargaining group, we've established our district team who's going to be looking at a lot of these pieces. The DDMs themselves have 8 one-hour webinars. They have 3 technical guides. There's just a lot to take in that our administrative team has been looking at, and I've been disseminating through our curriculum leaders. But we're going to use this team to really look at this collectively and try to figure out how this is going to work best for North Reading. We are, as a collective bargaining group, looking at district-determined measures and what's next for those pieces of the evaluation system. And when that staff and student feedback piece comes in, there's going to be a lot for this group to talk about how that actually fits into the process. Here are just a couple of timelines, just to show you what's lying ahead in the next few months. We've got our formative assessments in February, March for our folks on our one-year plans. We've got summative assessments coming in May and June, and the formative evaluations for those on two-year plans. In June, we've got all the summative assessments for those in one-year plans, all the formative evaluations for those in two-year plans. And we also have to submit district-determined measures for all educators. This includes not only teachers, but nurses, counselors. We have to submit a plan for having 2 measures for all those educators in June, which go into effect for next year. The summer would be the staff and student feedback piece. In the fall, the new cycle begins for everyone. There are summative assessments in the spring of 2015 for those in the 2-year plan. And in the spring of 2015, just to make it clear, the DDMs, the first year, so next year is year 1 of the baseline year for those district-determined measures in determining that 3-year trend. So next spring is the end of year 1. At the end of year 2, we have to report those scores to the Department of Ed, but we won't see the impact on the teacher plan until the following year, because we negotiated 3 years. But I know this is a ton of information, but I'm just showing you what lies ahead. But we do keep saying if we could take a huge billboard out, put it up on the highway, this is a work in progress. And I think both sides, administrators, educators, and even the Department of Ed too, admit there's a lot to this. It's a work in progress. And soft deadlines, working together, and making a real formative growth process. That's where we are at this time. So thank you.
Questions or comments? Karen?
Oh, this is really helpful.
I have one question.
Sure.
We've had a lot of discussions about the park tests here,
Mhm.
and the fact that, I forget what we decided, are students taking park also going to take MCAS? Is that what we decided?
The students at the little school will be in grade 3. The
Right.
students in grade 5 at the Batchelder will not.
So what kind of impact is that going to have on those teachers
Mhm.
because they won't have MCAS scores?
Sure. So that was part of our decision process. The impact would be for teachers in 6th grade who teach math or ELA. I'm forgetting at the moment which, it's math, yeah, for bachelor. So out of those, let's say 10 classes, all those students go to 6th grade. There's 2 to 3 teachers in 6th grade. You would have no data for 2 of those classes worth of students. So the impact would be much less because they still have all that math data on the other 8 classrooms. And that's just for 1 year. So that would have that impact. At the little school, on the other hand, all of the 4th grade teachers wouldn't have that
Right.
data. But you do have the data on the other tested areas. So that's another piece to it.
And I'd like to just add
yes.
that we are in the process of leaving MCAS behind if
Mhm.
the legislature votes to adopt PARC. So it's going to be a new test anyway.
That was my second question.
Mhm.
So if that happens and we make that transition to park, it's a different test than MCAS. and
Sure.
Mhm.
How do you work that so you're comparing apples to apples as students move up?
They've assured us that they will have scales, crosswalks to measure. It's all measuring growth, and there's been so much work on, because even if a teacher may have MCAS 1 year, because they teach 4th grade, they may move to 2nd grade the next year and not have MCAS anymore. So it's all about determining your growth for that 1 year, and then determining your growth for the next year. So they will have a measure for park growth. So it'll be just comparing how did I measure my 1-year growth in this year, and how did I measure it in the next year. And there will be, part of what's outlined for park are assessments at other levels for 9th and 11th grade. So you'll have more educators that are going to have that 1-year growth measure in the future.
Okay.
No, Patrick, on
Mhm.
step 1, self-assessment, it says
Yes.
educators self-assess their performance using student data.
Mhm.
Now, what student data is besides MCAS and PARC, and what are they using?
Sure, it could be absolutely anything, and that's part of what we're exploring in our data training. This could be...
Could be grades on report cards?
Could be report card class grades. It could be everyone that took a certain midterm, a common assessment.
Could it be SATs?
Could be anything that you set around, and even guidance counselors could be looking at data based on college attendance rates or dropout rates. Nurses might be looking at rate of return to class. So it's just that idea that it's really asking us to look at some numbers to justify how well we're doing, and to come up. It really helps us come up with new questions and new goals.
So how much subjectivity comes into this whole thing when you're doing the evaluation?
For the evaluator piece?
Yeah.
For the evaluator piece, There is a piece of judgment. There is judgment, and there is, there is always that discretion that the principal will be able to know. The principal always can make that decision, knowing, Karen had a really tough class this year, or whatever that piece is. Part of our professional training that's actually coming up in just a few weeks. We're going to go through scenarios because there's a lot of pieces of this to look at. So it's progress towards goals, evidence against the standard, mini observations, and we're going to go through 5, 6, 7 scenarios to really kind of practice this
It's
piece.
not 100% objective where there's going to be a grade and you didn't make the grade. There's a lot
not.
of subjective.
There is,
And
but
it's
that's the professional judgment of the evaluator that's bringing all that into view.
Because on the other side, you might have someone doing an evaluation and saying, geez, I really don't like the way this teacher is teaching, and I don't like the way the kids are responding. And then you look at her record or his record, and you see that the kids are really progressing when they go through this class, right? So, I mean, I think the subjectivity aspect is important because it does inform the objective parts of the evaluation.
One comment that I would like to make is that in order to better calibrate a common understanding of what proficient looks like with teaching and learning, administrators are going into classrooms in pairs, observing the same lesson, and then we're debriefing right after the lesson to take a look at what did we observe, what our students were doing, what were our teachers doing, what was the evidence of student learning, and what is some potential feedback that we'll give to that educator that might provoke a thought around improving teaching and learning in the classroom. So that's been an embedded professional development opportunity that A, gets the administrators into classrooms more often to do these 10-minute mini observations, and B, engaging educators in real thoughtful conversations around teaching and learning. Not that it didn't occur before, but it's happening more often now because there's more opportunity for that. At first it was mandated, but now we're starting to see the value of that. And I really enjoy being in the schools with the principals and doing that collaborative observation piece and really having those conversations that sometimes you don't always have an opportunity at my level to have because of all the other things that get in the way. But getting into classrooms has been a joy and really taking a look at the teaching and learning that's taking place. And I can tell you from firsthand experience, there's some pretty amazing things going on in our classrooms in our schools.
Absolutely.
Patrick,
Yes.
is this now part of the Code of Massachusetts regulations? Because I see a reference to it. Is this actually the regulations from the Department of Education?
Yeah.
They've established these regulations?
It is.
Okay.
It is. There were some pieces that were up to collective bargaining,
Right.
but for the most part, there's
This is
regulations.
regulations.
Yep.
And as I think, maybe I was wrong, I saw Cliff jotting some notes when Patrick was talking about buying new technology. And maybe you were writing something down about more unfunded mandates, but this
You guys write
does.
something down about the boiler room.
Maybe we could just ask Cliff what he meant.
No, but this, I think it's probably gonna turn out to be a good system, but it's going to end up, and I think Michael's talked about this a little bit, it's about some new software licenses we're gonna have to purchase down the road for this, to keep up with this. And my guess is we won't be seeing anything from the state to help pay for that, so,
You know you won't.
I mean, I know we won't.
You know you won't.
This is
You're not even
outstanding.
gonna get all your
Really
chapter
is.
70 money.
Right.
Heck of a lot of work.
This is good, it's a lot of
It
work.
is.
and-
It's a big piece, but it is, I echo that, I often say the best part of the job, though, is getting in those classrooms and talking about, everyone appreciates taking that time to step back and reflect. It makes us do our job better, so it's worth it in the end, but it's a lot of work.
Well,
to
it's
do
one of
it
those
well.
things.
To do it well.
Being part of the negotiating team with the administrative side, with the teachers to get this all approved, it's one of the things that both sides are kind of grudgingly coming to the table because you're saying, we have a great system in place, but at the same time, I think the cooperation around the table for that entire negotiation session was excellent, and
It was.
from my understanding is it continues.
Continues,
Mhm.
yeah.
So,
Good.
that's working well. Great. Thanks, Patrick.
All good professionals are happy to find out how they can become better professionals.
That's correct.
Mhm.
Yep.
Patrick, I think the superintendent's working you hard. I really do.
20 people. My goodness.
Take tomorrow off.
Thanks.
Only have 4.
And I'd love to say, now you can go home, Patrick, but I was wondering if you could stay around just for a minute for our
Yes.
next item, because I think you might
Yes.
have some input
You
here.
don't have to.
Sure.
If you don't, yeah.
No, absolutely.
Actually, we're,
Not sure what it is, but I'll.
well, we're moving to a policy manual
Do we have another
review.
copy of this? To give Patrick to
Yeah,
see?
and it's related to social media, policy on Facebook and social networking websites. And I know I have a lot of comments on what we have.
Me
and,
too.
And I think you, as, with one of your roles being Director of Technology, might have some input on this also.
This is the MASC. You
Yep.
had a chance
Yep.
to take it. I'll just give you a copy.
So it's policy manual review and revision for first reading. The policy committee reviewed the mask policy on Facebook and social networking websites and is going to present that tonight. I don't know if we need to read it first, or if we want to discuss it, or how we want to approach it. Because
Policy.
I'm just saying, I'm personally not going to, I personally don't want to take a vote on this policy because I don't think it reflects what I was looking for. So, I don't know.
I'll second that.
Yeah, so I don't know if we want to read it for first reading, or we just want to have discussion about it, and then we can move to another.
Well, I think you should probably read it for first reading and then have a discussion.
Yeah, I
Don't you
think that's
think?
right.
Okay,
I mean, just so people know what we're
sure.
talking about. No?
No, it's fine.
Unless there's some reason you want it.
Do you want
No.
someone to read it?
The policy that you have
It's a
before you
mask, right?
is the MASC.
Right.
MASC policy with some slight modification.
Okay,
And it was, at the time the policy committee developed the changes, made the changes and reviewed this, we concluded that there were probably a couple of members of the committee that, the school committee, that have more experience with some of the social networking sites than the people on the policy committee
Right.
had. And that there would probably be substantial comment on it. So we're more than happy to have some comment on it.
okay.
But don't think of changing it.
Thanks, Cliff.
I'll read it. I like to read aloud.
I know you do.
Okay.
I enjoy listening
You
to
do
you
it,
read.
you do it very well.
Thank you.
Very well.
So this is a policy on Facebook and social networking websites. The superintendent and school principals will annually remind staff members and orient new staff members concerning the importance of maintaining proper decorum in the online digital world as well as in person. Employees must conduct themselves in ways that do not distract from or disrupt the educational process. The orientation reminders will give special emphasis to, 1, improper fraternization with students using Facebook and similar internet sites or social networks or via cell phone, texting, or telephone. A, teachers may not list current students as friends on networking sites. B, all e-contacts with students should be through the district's computer and telephone system except emergency situations. C, all contact and messages by coaches with team members shall be sent to all team members except for messages concerning medical or academic privacy matters, in which case the messages will be copied to the athletic director and the school principal. D, teachers will not give out their private cell phone or home phone numbers without prior approval of the district. E, inappropriate contact via email or phone is prohibited. 2, inappropriateness of posting items with sexual content. 3, inappropriateness of posting items exhibiting or advocating use of drugs and alcohol. 4, examples of inappropriate behavior from other districts as behavior to avoid. 5, monitoring and penalties for improper use of district computers and technology. 6, the possibility of penalties including dismissal from employment for failure to exercise good judgment in online conduct. The superintendent or designees will periodically conduct internet searches to see if teachers have posted inappropriate materials online. When inappropriate use of computers and websites is discovered, the school principals and superintendent will promptly bring the inappropriate use to the attention of the staff member and may consider and apply disciplinary action up to and including termination. And this was approved by the Mass Association of School Committees in August of 2010. Questions, comments? Karen?
I want to rewrite it. Is that okay?
My issues with it is, I'm actually looking for a policy that will enable teachers to use
Yes, that's the
Facebook
problem.
and social media, and this says they can't. In fact, we're already in violation of this because we have principals in schools that have Twitter accounts,
Right.
which violates this.
Well, I would respectfully think that it's talking about the difference between using them as an outgoing, sending it to all or posting something out as opposed to sending it to individuals. I think that's where it differs. But I think this is 4 years old and so much has changed in
Right.
4
Yeah.
years. And Twitter, I think, changed everything,
Right.
and that's more popular than Facebook at this time. So
Right.
I think you're right on that we need to really update it.
I'm wondering if there must be districts that have newer
Yes.
policies that actually say, here's how we're using Facebook, here's how we're using Twitter.
There are. That's,
Yeah.
I think that, but there needs to be a broader policy that talks about social media and communication versus social networking and Facebook.
Right.
This names, it's just so specific, and there are so many things that we do to communicate now that's part of our everyday lives, that we really just need to make some decisions as a district, what we think is acceptable in terms of individual contact versus not. And
Right.
then the digital space, notwithstanding, that's appropriate whether they're using their phone or talking to a student. It's just the application of that to the digital space. And I think we write policies around things we don't understand because we're nervous about it. And I totally get like why that happens, but this is limiting. It also is just around the training. The district should align all their procedures around this work, as
Right.
well as providing ongoing training and resources for people who need it, because the line might not be so clear. If you're following a teacher on Twitter because it's class whatever and it's part of the curriculum, we saw that wonderful course where kids look at Twitter and they come up with current events, I think it was called.
Right, it was at
You
current,
know.
at the high school, at our meeting at the high school.
Right, I'm sure
Right.
there's violations in there somewhere.
Exactly.
But it's not the intent, so it's about the intent of communication, not the actual medium of communication. I think that's why I find this so challenging.
Again, I say there's a big difference between private messaging and public messaging.
Absolutely.
And I
Right.
think that's the difference. I mean, if it's out there for everyone to see, you need to be careful of both what you're putting out there, but also, but private messaging, there's ways to do it. And part of it is the professional development too, showing the teachers the safe way to do these things, with the way we have our student email addresses that are used at the high school and the middle school, that they can't email externally from them, and so there's ways to communicate in a safe way using those messages as opposed to using a private email that's a personal account,
And I think all of these things that we're supposed to remind and orient the staff toward every year or whenever necessary, those are all good. Those should be part of a policy, but I agree with Karen and with Patrick. I think what we want to do is figure out how we can, for example, on Facebook, you can set up a Facebook page that doesn't have friends, but people like that page, and then they become kind of a member of, so it might be Mr. Jones' current events class, and you go to that Facebook page and you post links to current events, and you do projects together, or even Google Docs or something like that. This doesn't even address
Right.
something like a
Well,
Google
it
Docs
also doesn't
or.
address sort of things like Pinterest and Instagram.
Right.
Like, there are this photography stuff. You have a project where everyone's going to contribute to someone's board and a teacher sets it up. It's still a private account. It's no special thing that cleanses it by doing it on a district computer. It's just a private account. There are inventive ways we can use social media to enhance learning, and we do that every day. So where's the balance? And we have to determine as a district where that is. And it's not so clear unless you fully understand all the different medias, but I think it's more simple than just saying, for Facebook it's this, for Twitter it's this, for
Right.
Pinterest.
It's gotta be a
all
general
about
policy
Don't
about-
inappropriately contact a student
Right.
in any way whatsoever. And, for social media, this is how you can use these medias, not get stuck in something that could, potentially be bad for a student and
Yeah.
a teacher or a staff member. So we just need to figure out where the lines are. The more
Right.
prescriptive we get, the harder it's gonna be for us to support our staff and our.
Well, the easiest way is to say you can't use it, which to me
Which is
is
terrible.
defeating and limiting. So I don't know where to go with this. Should we look at other districts, or do you know?
Well, Karen just asked if she could rewrite it. Do you already have?
Yes, I do have several policies.
From other districts?
Thought I had uploaded them to Dropbox. but
Oh, maybe they are.
But I think the other thought I was having was, I really love some input from employees already and how they're using social media and some of their issues. Even, I don't know how we could facilitate that kind of feedback, but there already is a lot of stuff ongoing in the district. Maybe we could find out, maybe Patrick could help gather some information about how technology, particularly social media, is being used to support communication. Maybe some of the pitfalls that we may not think of. Would that be something that you could help us with?
We can definitely talk about that. And I think, as was said earlier, I think we need to think about someone who's doing something very good, that's very positive for students, shouldn't feel oh no, I can't do this anymore. I mean,
Right.
I think of teachers who have children in the system who they may not have students as their friends, but friends of a friend, because their
Yeah.
child is friends with, I mean,
School.
you never want to limit and make people feel like they can't, but I think another piece of this, which is included here, that we haven't talked about, is just teachers and educators being held to a different standard as far as what they do post on their private accounts. And, even though it's not a policy, we do informally discuss this with teachers, and definitely at our new teacher orientation, we spend a good amount of time talking about that. We talk about, what your friend who works somewhere else, and not in a school, might post something from their weekend. Well, you don't do that because you're representing this district all the time, and you're representing yourself as a teacher. So I think that's an important piece of this as well to
Right.
think about, which is a little bit, that's different than using the tools. It's just about how we represent ourselves.
You see that in the media all the time of teachers who are
Mhm.
dismissed from their positions because they have posted
Right.
something or
Mhm.
involved in something that somebody finds. And I mean, there's no privacy now, and the
Yeah.
internet has made that impossible. And I think we need to provide some support, but also acknowledge as a district that there are some boundaries. And we just need to determine where those boundaries are for working in North Reading. So I'm not sure that we know how to answer that tonight. I would love to hear feedback from everyone about where you think that line lies, but it's a line we need to figure out. Mel, do you have any other thoughts about that?
No, I just think, I don't know if Patrick, if you want to actually, if you have policies that you
Yeah.
think are good and you want to revise them, but also include talking to Patrick, and then you can
Absolutely.
get that to the subcommittee, the policy subcommittee, they can review, and then we
I'd
can.
like you to read it too.
Okay.
And just contribute to, because I
So,
think that you.
can you and Karen connect at some point? I'm sure
Sure.
you have a pretty good handle
Yeah.
on how we're using social media.
That'd be great.
And I'll talk to our digital learning specialists and principals about, identifying some of those copy. I know off the top of my head about 5 or 6 right now as we're talking that
Yeah.
you've seen some of them present to you. So getting from our heavy early adopters
Yeah.
of some of this to
What
really
they're
get some
going.
feedback about how they would like to be have a policy that protects and enables good use, positive use.
Yeah, it's really a twofold policy. I mean, one is,
Mm.
here's how we're going to use this to educate our students better, even better than we are today.
Mhm.
But here's what you're not going to do with it, or you're going to get in trouble. So we need to cover both, really
Yeah.
both those aspects, without making
Right.
it limiting or.
I agree, yeah. So,
Mel,
I'm
is
happy-
there a way, if you're going to, and I don't know to what extent we're educating through these types of,
Mhm.
of, you know, electronic meetings,
Social
but,
media.
Yeah.
social media. But if it was going to be part of the educational process, can this not be funneled through a North Reading school central, pipeline? In other words, instead of each teacher being able to, tweet out something or put something on Facebook, why wouldn't it, if it's educational, why wouldn't it go through an approved, monitored type of system?
That's what's
That's a good question.
envisioned.
I mean, to me, it seems, again,
If
if he teaches, and we have seen some of the uses, but I think it's a real dangerous area for,
It is.
for teachers to be involved in.
Yeah.
And I think it should be something that can be monitored, and if they know that, then it's for true educational purposes, then it's going through this type of a.
Well, I think that may be limiting, because you can't really take all the tools that are available in social media, I don't think, but there's one thing you can do.
Well, can't there be a North Reading?
When someone does a project and someone has something like that, Patrick or the superintendent or the principal has to have access to whatever the teacher is doing.
Because I think you're gonna have undefined boundaries here. You're gonna say, well, you can't use it
You do.
inappropriately. No kidding, you can't use it
Right.
inappropriately. What the hell's inappropriate? You know,
Right,
what-
that was
what's
my
that
other question on
standard?
this.
Until we
There's-
see it, until we see what it is, you're
It's
not
like,
gonna be
it's
able
like
to
the
define
definition of pornography.
pornography
when you
or,
see it, right.
natural acts.
Right.
I can't define it, but I'll know it when I see it.
Right.
And that's the problem with some of this
Well,
stuff.
part of that is, there's good training and trying to come up with real examples to help people figure that out.
Yeah.
But one way that this issue, which you raise, is and this is an important issue about vetting, that other districts have resolved this in the US, has been about registering their use of social media, or at least making some central person aware they're using it.
Right.
So that it can be monitored, and it has to be public, and there are guidelines specifically for each type of social media network that are updated.
Because essentially, if each individual is doing it on their own, you're not gonna know whether they violated your policy
It has to be-
until they
has to
do
be
it and somebody
registered.
reports
I think that's a
it.
good, the registration aspect is.
It's just one
is
way they've
important.
solved it. There are other strategies which I'll share when
Yeah.
I go through this,
Sure.
but I think we could probably think of ways
Yeah.
that would work.
And right now, any teacher web page or teacher pages are linked directly from our
To the
school
district
pages. Like, we've
website.
made that clear, that if you create a page, it needs to be linked from our main page. It shouldn't be something that couldn't easily be found by anybody, and that way it's all very public and transparent.
The other thing here is, and it's interesting, you know, in the texting aspect, for example, and I know why they're saying it, but it's just like, if a kid is late for a game, and the coach is sitting there and he's got his phone, and he's like, I want to text and see where the kid is, but this says they can't, because you have to text the whole team. I suppose you can text the whole team and
Could.
say,
Say, "Where are you?"
Where are
Where is he?
you? Does anybody know where Joe is, right?
And the guy sitting next to him that gets a message.
Right, it says, Joe?
Hey, Joe, he wants you.
Exactly.
Or you text the parent.
Or you text the parent,
You know,
yeah.
so that, and then have the parent text the kid. But
But
that.
this has, I mean,
it's
this has
complicated.
opened up. I mean,
Complicated.
it's about 20 cans of worms, all of this stuff, because there's,
I just don't know to what extent this type of education is going on, that they're using these types of social media, you know, and whether it's just teachers here and there doing it, and it seems to me it's unregulated, unmonitored, uncontrolled.
it is.
It totally is. If
Yeah.
we could solve this problem, maybe it'd be an amazing.
The question I have is whether it's unnecessary.
Of course.
We just
it
need
is.
to give people
I'm just
guidance.
No, I know, I know.
I'm just asking, really, I mean, if
We
you, you know.
have a very interesting variety. You have people who use the computer in a lot of different ways, don't use the social networking sites. I have a Facebook account. It doesn't have a picture or anything on it, but it.
What's
You're doing way better than Jerry.
It's the
You're
only
fine.
way you can get there. And then we have two that use it all the time, I
Right,
gather,
yes.
and one that doesn't have a computer. So, you know,
Janine uses it
we have a
occasionally,
variety.
not as much as Karen or I, though.
But there's like, when you use it a lot, sometimes you're so close to it that you don't actually see what's outside.
Exactly.
And that's so important. So, I will put pen to paper with Patrick and try to pull something together, but acknowledging there's stuff in here that's good. There's really good stuff in here. We just have to figure out a way to make sure that it empowers staff and their guidelines and help them so they understand how to use it, as well as set the parameters,
Right.
what's acceptable and what
Well, that's
isn't.
gonna be tough to do.
It's hard to do both, but we have to do both.
They, at the beginning of the year, sent home some kind of paper for the students to sign off that if during they take the computer course, that, they won't do this, do that, or do the other thing. Is there something similar like that we could?
Teachers?
Yes.
That's the acceptable use policy.
And that already exists for staff. There is an acceptable
Both.
use policy for staff.
See, we
But
want
how-
to encourage use, but we want to make them understand there is some parameters around that use, but at the same time, we don't want to scare them so they don't use it. And as Karen was saying earlier, it's much more than social media. Google Docs, which is, it's a place that 10 people can go at the same time and edit a document together.
Yeah.
Well, that's essentially, everybody's online, and there's an opportunity for someone doing something inappropriate there when they're all in that shared space on the internet. And
Just to clarify too, with Janine, it's more than just, the appropriate use policy is really for school-issued equipment and equipment in school. This is regulating how you use your private stuff
Right.
at home,
But
and that is a big difference. And I do think defining that line is probably going to be impossible. I really think what it's going to be about is, how do we, professional development, education, to really understand, hey, this new site that doesn't exist yet comes out in a month. What are we going to do? How do we adapt? How do we, and to keep that definition of what's appropriate and what's to keep that conversation going is
Doesn't
really
that
what it's
create a
about.
more personal relationship between the student and the teacher? And what's to preclude the student from sending something back?
no, see, that's the difference. So
It's not private.
it's
No
not
private
a
communication.
Facebook page where you're friending. You might be, or with Google Docs, you're setting up a space where people can come and work together.
Right. It's
It's-
basically
it's-
when you like it, you're getting updates from that page. So
Right.
what you're doing is you're centralizing the message. So it's as if you posted it on the school website,
Yeah.
but every time you did it, someone got an update. Well,
Right.
kids aren't always checking email anymore. So if we post something to the school website, kids, parents, everyone gets an email if they choose. They can select it. Kids aren't checking email anymore. So if the
Right.
kids are only on Facebook, but what they will see is, boom, in their news feed, this just got updated on Mr. So-and-so's history page, and it's not a two-way communication, it's not private. And I think the networks are getting smarter about this as well. And the same with Twitter. Follow your teacher on Twitter. they're not writing to you, you're not writing to them, and that's the kind of stuff you'd say, no private messaging.
Right.
However, following the teacher, then whenever the teacher wants to share an interesting article or video or link, they share it. Now they're sharing it to their classroom, they're sharing it to all their former students, their current students, or everybody, so it gets into the, and we do everything that we can possibly do to come up with safe in-district ways to do this without using Facebook proper or Twitter or things like that. But and I was a big advocate of that in the years past. I teach a class on this, and we talked about that quite a bit. But the more and more popular this gets, I feel like, are we doing a disservice to the kids not using the actual forum that, the opportunity they have to follow political figures and
Right.
real world people on Twitter as opposed to something artificial created in the classroom. So again, I think there's ways to do that as safe as possible that we need to look at. And I think there are ways to do that and really limit that window on what we can see. So we
So let's-
look forward to talking more.
Let's
about
work
it.
on that,
Yeah.
and within the next few meetings, not next meeting, but maybe the meeting after
Yeah, I
that.
would say we'll have time to do, and I'd also
Right.
like to send it, do you want to send it back to the subcommittee first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair, the next policy subcommittee meeting is on March 26th, just to give you an idea of
We
some
probably could have a
timelines.
revised thing by then, right?
Yep.
So, okay, we'll have to track that. The goal will be to get something
To the policy.
subcommittee.
By March 26th.
By March 26th. But one other issue with this is, since we're talking about private use of computers and, what are there legal, is this something that would have to be reviewed by, the school department attorney? Or would we have cases, if we have other policies that have already been vetted?
Right, I think we should.
Yeah.
This is just a murky area in general, so it might be good. But again, whenever we do that, I sort of feel like we're giving over our flexibility to actually do policy work.
Yeah.
There's always ways we can protect ourselves as a district and as a committee, but I think we need to think a little bit more broadly and then just raise some issues that need to potentially be vetted by our attorney.
And I think that once we get the policy back, we'll all have
Yeah.
a chance to ask our questions. Jerry's raising a lot of good points
Yeah.
about real control.
I agree.
So,
Policy subcommittee members, we do have the next meeting on February 26th, but I think
That's
that
too
turner
soon.
is too soon,
Yeah.
so we'd probably have to wait till the
Right.
March 26th meeting.
yeah. Okay. Great.
Right.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you.
Okay.
Patrick, I'll email you schedule time.
Thanks, Patrick.
Okay, next, and thank you to the subcommittee for putting this together, and now we have something that we can work from. Appreciate it.
That's great.
Okay, next, we have minutes. The regular meeting of January 13th. The only thing I found was on the visitors, you need to add Madison Capizzuto. She's not listed under the visitors, and she had given the student report that night. Other than that, I don't think I found anything else. Anybody else have anything? If not, I'll have entertain a motion to approve.
Minutes of January 13.
Second.
Motion by Cliff, second by Janine. All's in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Abstention.
One abstention. And next, we have the executive session from that same night. I went through these. I didn't find any issues with those for January 13th.
Move to approve the executive session minutes, January 13.
Motion by Cliff, second by Janine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? One abstention. Okay. Budget update. Michael?
Thank you. The February 2014 budget report was included in your packet, and really not a lot of new information or updates from the previous reports this fiscal year. Again, the major drivers driving the fiscal 14 budget continue to be, the special education costs, which we've discussed, and the unexpected costs that have arisen this year to address some newly identified student needs. So that continues to be a challenge that we're dealing with this year. As I've stated in the past, we've been able to absorb these additional, increases to the budget that have occurred after the budget was appropriated last spring through, the prepayments and additional circuit breaker revenue that we received this fiscal year. But it definitely continues to be a challenge. The other major driver that we always look at when we look at the budget is certainly the utility and operational costs. Certainly, it's been a very cold winter season, but I think with what we have budgeted within the lines of heat and utility expenses, we're certainly going to remain within budgeted lines at this point. That's what projections are indicating. The RMLD rate increase, we heard from Mr. Norton at the last meeting. They had the vote of that rate increase at their last meeting, which was last Wednesday evening, and that vote did go through. So the RMLD board did approve that rate increase effective February 1st. It is anticipated that that rate increase will be about 3.9 to around 4% this fiscal year. And looking at our current costs, rates that we are paying and what our expected usage is from now until the end of the fiscal year, I do expect that will be about a $4,000 cost impact this fiscal year. And again, we do have some contingencies in the electricity lines, and I think we'll be able to absorb this cost without a significant impact, but it's certainly an increase of about $4,000 this year. We've talked about the food service program, so I continue to monitor that account and the program performance closely. Certainly we have that savings from the sort of the reduction in hours that we had at the beginning of the fiscal year. And meal counts continue to be slightly up from last year. It's a little bit fluctuating amongst each level and amongst each school, but overall the meal counts are slightly up from last year. So again, we're just continuing to monitor the performance, but we are projecting a loss at the end of the fiscal year at this point in time. On the payroll side, again, not a lot of new information to report. As is years past, we continue to need to appoint long-term substitutes to cover leave of absences, so we're doing that. In some cases, those are resulting in a cost impact, and other in cases they're resulting in a savings and so forth from a financial impact based on what our contractual obligations are. But at this point in time, I think the FY14 budget is certainly remaining in good standing and very close to the budgeted lines. Without these major drivers, with all these major drivers at play. So at that point, I'll open up to any specific questions on the report.
Anybody have questions or comments? Jerry?
Mike, when you put the committed, you have expended, then you have committed, that's your projection for the balance of the fiscal year, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay,
That's
so-
remaining expenses
So you're
that are
trying to project
expected.
that out over the next 4.5 months to see where you're at
Correct.
the end of the fiscal year?
We are.
All right.
And, in some cases, certainly on the expense side, like for instance, we encumber all of the gas and oil and utility costs at the beginning of the year. We don't anticipate at this point that we'll need to spend all of the budgeted lines. So we do a thorough review, the last quarter of the year, April, May, and June, and we can, reduce some of those encumbrances and look to see if any of those can be, used on other purposes at the end. But at this point, everything is encumbered, and that's reflected on the report.
So those areas you encumber everything, and then if you were running a deficit there, you wouldn't be able to necessarily project that out at this point in time?
I'm not projecting a deficit.
Okay.
Based on, certainly the heating degree days and heat is certainly probably higher than it has been, but again, we did budget some contingencies there, and I think we're still certainly going to remain within budgeted lines. So with what we've budgeted and what the projections show, we're within budget.
Okay.
I just want to add that we're progressing nicely on the review for the food service contract, and Michael is now working with the vendors. I don't know when you
Correct.
plan to bring that forward that would be later in the year, obviously. Do you have any idea
Right,
when?
so we're planning on making that a meeting in April, the April timeframe. That was
Okay.
the timeline that we put together. But certainly myself and Mel and the principal at the high school, John Bernard, who has made up the evaluation committee of the proposals, we've had several meetings, and there's a lot of information to go through. It's certainly a very thorough process. We've certainly gone back to several of the vendors, requested some more information, some more data on their financial projections and so forth, and we're evaluating really the two proposals that we received from each vendor. So keep in mind, we not only received a a status quo management-only proposal. We received a fully privatized model, and so we're trying to really do the due diligence and look at all aspects and pros and cons of each model, and as well as what the impact may be on our not only financially but on the employees and so forth. And we've been going through that process, and I think it's certainly been a challenging process. I don't think there's any clear-cut decision at this point based on the analysis, and we're continuing to go through it. But it's certainly been a lot of good information and to go through, and so we expect that we'll continue to do that. And some more information we're trying to flush out in the process. But we expect in April we'll have a recommendation for the full committee.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions for Michael? Okay, Kathy, no staffing, no bids and donations, correct?
Correct.
Okay, subcommittee updates. Jerry, athletic subcommittee?
We had an athletic subcommittee meeting on February 4th. On the agenda, we had a question of baseball fields. Phil Dardino, who's very active in baseball in town, particularly Little League, had asked me to see if I could put this on the agenda. And the issue is whether or not we have enough baseball fields to accommodate not only our high school athletic programs, but also our other baseball programs in town. And this issue had come up, as I think everybody remembers, originally, or at least at one time, we were talking about putting a baseball field in with the new school complex. We realized that space did not allow for that, so we're essentially down to 2 baseball fields, the high school baseball field and the baseball field at the Hood School. So, again, I think there was an agreement that we should look for additional space. Phil Dardino has agreed to put together a subcommittee to take a look at this issue, to take a look at possible available spaces around town, and in addition to that, potential costs of developing these spaces. And he's going to get back to us, I think, at the next subcommittee meeting to see how that's progressing.
On that committee, too, Dave Johnson is going to, as the athletic director at the high school, is going to participate on that subcommittee. And then they're going to come back and report to us.
Yeah, and it is an issue because we have a varsity team, a junior varsity team, and a freshman team. And again, we only have those 2 fields to work with. The Hood School's a good field, but it's not a full-size baseball field either.
Right.
So it's a school issue as well as a non-school issue. We also continue to put on the agenda the middle school, high school building project so that we can evaluate the athletic facilities as they're developing in the new project, and to see if there are areas that we need to potentially add to. Some of the questions that have come up, extending the possibility of irrigation up to the new practice field and the softball field. A question was brought up the other day as to whether or not these fields are going to be seeded or sodded, and the cost differential between seed and sod. I think Marty Tilton, who's in charge of grounds for the Recreation Department, had suggested that the field would be more usable and usable sooner if we had to do sod instead of seed. Questions about things like, again, ancillary type things like a scoreboard for the softball field. So these are all things that we're trying to monitor as we progress through the building project and see if we can, resolve some of these issues. We talked about contributions and donations, and one of the things we discussed is, in conjunction with the building project, reaching out to the various organizations to see if there are things that they can help out with. For instance, youth softball, youth basketball, Chuck Carucci's group there, the Hall of Fame group,
right.
To see if there are things that we could add as the project's progressing and being built that we could put into the project. So that's underway as well. Dave Johnson, who's our athletic director, had talked to us about adding some coaches to some of the fall teams. In particular, I think Melanie was talking about soccer.
Soccer, yeah.
And obviously, that's a budget issue, and I think we decided that we'll bring that up when we have the budget discussions for next fiscal year. I think, as people remember, last year we had an assistant softball and baseball coach who worked out very well, and it's in this year's fiscal budget. And then Dave Johnson and John Bernard both talked about, as we make the transition from the old high school to the new high school, we have a number of signs highlighting the accomplishments of our teams over the years in the gymnasium, and they wanted to try to take those and make them uniform so that we have banners potentially, and they're going to get us some examples of what those would look like, so that we could consolidate all of those and put them uniformly into the new gymnasium, because we certainly we want to bring our past into the future with us. So those are the things we had talked about. I don't know if Mel has anything to add to that.
No, I think the key thing with that for the new gymnasium is uniformity. Now at the current gym, there's signs of all different shapes, sizes, colors, and we want to recognize all our athletes and teams, but we want to do it in a way that it looks, and Dave has some good ideas. I think he was going to go out to North Andover High
Right.
School and take some pictures of the way they've done it up there. They've got one wall is dedicated to X, one wall is dedicated to Y, and so make it look nice whilst continuing to recognize.
And so
all of
people
our-
know nothing would be left out. In other
Right.
words, any sign that we have in the current gymnasium for sectional championships or sectional finalists or whatever, that would be carried over.
Right, those will all be recognized
to
on the new.
To the new gym.
Right, we wouldn't leave anything out. I think that's it. The other side, we had a finance planning team meeting on Friday. Cliff and I were present. I think the main topic of that meeting and the main message coming out is that it's going to be another challenging year for the budget. The state has not increased local aid at all, and there's a tiny increase in Chapter 70. We don't know yet in terms of the special education circuit breaker what that's going to be, whether that percentage is going to go up or down. There was talk about having Brad Jones come in, hopefully at the next meeting, so we can talk to him about things we'd like to see happening. And Cliff brought up, it's actually been one of his and my favorite subjects over the year, which is in North Reading. We have a larger percentage of households that attend schools, students attending schools. And if you look, compare it to other communities, other communities have a lot of homes where there's no students living. We don't have that. And with the moving in of a lot of families that's happening right now, that ratio is only going to get worse for us. And Chapter 70 doesn't reflect that. And that's a problem. We lose out on Chapter 70 funding. And I don't know when the last time they revised the formula was. Was it
93, 94?
93.
Yeah.
93.
Yeah.
So 20 years, they
There's some
haven't.
slight revisions,
The
but not,
number,
nothing
the
major.
number of students is included.
Right.
And the distribution through the system is included in the Chapter 7 formula. What's not reflected is the ability of the community to sustain
Exactly.
that number
Right.
for the number of households we
Right.
have.
Right.
And in some cases, the communities are fairly close. We have, I think Reading is reasonably close to us, and Linfield isn't far off. But if you look at community, Saugus, for instance, they're like a third of the number of students per household that we have. If we had 1/3 the students, our cost for education in the community would be very low.
Right.
It would be pretty easy for us all to deal with all the other needs of
Our budget issues will go
government.
away.
But that's not the case. And I've argued this point with people from the DESE, and I get nowhere. But we need perhaps a little bit of a nudge from the executive branch or
Right.
from the legislative branch of government to pound on them a little bit and make the point.
I guess you'd call it student density. We have fewer households sending more students, and that has a significant impact on the ability to pay. Because you're going back to the same households to get more money, and then you're limited by 2.5%.
Right.
So I think that was the main, there really wasn't anything else that came out of that, was there?
That's pretty much everything that was.
Right, that was
discussed.
what the focus was. So, and we'll be moving along. Our budget will be presented, preliminary budget on March 10th.
March 10th.
So then we will have a budget
Public-
workshop after that.
Yes.
Yep, there'll be a budget workshop and then a public hearing on April 7th, the first
Right.
meeting in April.
The thing that, to me, is most interesting about it is, and I made the comment at that meeting, that this is deja vu all over again. I mean, the numbers that we come up with every year as a shortfall, the same numbers. I mean, they're almost like to the penny.
Right.
They're, for this time in the progress of coming up with a budget, they're the same number. And it's very frustrating, because we see the same challenge every year. Can't make much progress.
The good news is, in terms of collections for this fiscal year, things look good. There's probably some areas where there'll be more coming in than expected, auto excise, meals tax slightly, but then there are other areas where we could be a little bit under. So, but everything seems to be on on schedule. Any other comments on, questions on finance planning team? Okay, we have a bunch of subcommittee meetings coming up. No need to specifically mention those. Administrative reports, Kathy?
Yes, I distributed a supplemental administrative report to you this evening, and I have 3 items that are included in that report for your information. The first is the Financial Assistance Program Letter to Parents and Guardians. As you know, earlier this year, Mr. Connolly brought to you a change in the process for providing financial assistance to families seeking relief from paying user fees. And so a letter was created to send home to parents, guardians, outlining this revised process, and a copy of that letter is attached for your information. Mr. Connolly has also written an article for Around the Schoolyard that will appear in the transcript this week that also details much of that information that's included in that letter. So it will be made available to the general public on Thursday. The second item, Mr. Connolly already made reference to the RMLD increase to rates this year. At the last school committee meeting, as you remember, Mr. Norton, the North Reading Community Rep to the RMLD Citizens Board, presented the background information regarding the rate increase. And you had requested that we submit a letter to Ms. Colleen O'Brien, who is the general manager of RMLD, expressing your concern about a mid-budget year hike. And so a copy of that letter has been included in your packet for your information as well. Just as a follow-up to that, after Ms. O'Brien received that letter, she did call the district, and Michael and I had a conference call with her, and she went into pretty in-depth explanation as to the whys for making this increase at this particular time. At the end of the day, though, it is an impact to a fiscal budget that's already half expended moving forward. But I thought the explanation was pretty clear as to why they're doing it, and it's more about what didn't happen in the past as opposed to something new having an impact on going forward. Is there anything you want to add to that, Michael?
No, I think that kind of sums it up. It was really, unfortunately, it was probably something that should have happened, in the past, and it didn't for whatever reason. So now they need to, have this, an increase that's probably more dramatic than it needed to be, given their need to cover their costs.
Right.
So.
And as Mr. Norton had explained to the committee, there have been substantial transitions that RMLD has gone through in the recent past, and that contributed to the need for this to take place now. And the final piece that I have included in this supplemental report has to do with the coordinated program review. In your packet, you're going to see a letter to me from the Department of Education notifying the North Reading School District that it has been identified for a coordinated program review, also known as a CPR, in the next school year. That means it would take place in 2014-15. The original date for the CPR was supposed to take place this year, but because the NEASC site visit is occurring this year, 2 of those kinds of reviews do not take place in the same year, so the CPR was bumped out another year. So that was good. But the actual CPR work that the district needs to submit to the department takes place this year in the form of a self-assessment that needs to be submitted by May 14th. So, as you know, there is a list of mitigating factors this year that I think warrant another postponement of the coordinated program review. So I sent a request to the department on October 17th requesting to postpone the visit until the next school year, and that request was denied. So we moved forward with attending some of the technical assistance workshops that are provided by the department, and while we were attending one, we had shared our story that we have, and I'll go through that list in a moment. We have 2 interims sitting in those most influential positions that will need to put this self-assessment together. We have an interim director and an interim assistant director. And so when we shared that story at some of our technical assistants, workshops, we were encouraged to go back to the department and share in more detail why we felt that it would warrant a year's postponement. And so I again outlined all of the mitigating factors for consideration in a letter that was sent to the department on January 29th. And today I received a call informing me that our request was denied again. So a copy of my letter is attached, and I just thought it was important for the committee to know what these mitigating factors are that are so extraordinary this year in the area of special ed that warranted this request for postponement. As you know, North Reading High School is engaging in a NEASC site visit this year, which requires all of central office administrators to be actively engaged in this process. The district is currently engaged in a significant and complex integrated building project involving both the middle and high school, and the PPS office is located in the midst of this construction process and will move this year, this spring. This month, the North Reading Public Schools participated in a circuit breaker audit, so that was another review by the department that required some extraordinary work on the part of our special ed accountant to gather some data to submit to the Department of Education. There is an interim director of pupil personnel services in place for the entire school year. There's an interim assistant director of pupil personnel services in place since last November through the end of this school year. The search process for a new director of pupil personnel services has begun and will commence and move forward over the next couple of months, and hopefully we'll have a new person on board to start in July 1. And one of our 2 PPS support staff resigned earlier this year to take a position in another school district. So we felt that all of these factors would provide a reasonable request for postponing this, but that did not happen. So I am disappointed, and I'm concerned about the amount of time that it's going to take for 2 people that will be with us for a short amount of time to assemble all of the data that will be required to submit to the department in about 3 months. So we will do our best. I just wanted you to know this up front. There will be an extensive report that will be written regarding our ability to comply with what the department is asking us to do. It's going to be a challenge, but we will get it done.
So we will get it done, and this isn't any reflection on the interim people we have, because I think they're doing a great job, but it's not necessarily going to be our best work because we can't really put the time required to probably do what we really want to do. What are the potential ramifications here? I guess that's my concern is, so we really don't have the time or the people in place to do this, and then we get a report back that is less than favorable.
Well, you can see that in the letter from the Department of Education, this is a process that every district goes through every 6 years.
Right.
And sometimes it gets pushed out for 7. I was asking for an 8-year cycle. I don't think one more year is going to make or break the effectiveness of our special ed department. But I have the coordinated program review report of findings from the last time that this was conducted in North Reading, and that was in 2008. So what happens is there's a whole set of criteria that we need to respond to and rate how we are performing in that particular area. And then the department comes out, takes a look at how we rated ourselves, and then they make a determination as to whether we are partially implementing, or whether there's some critical information that needs to be provided to the Department of Ed around something that we're not doing quite well. So again, it's a lot of review of our compliance with standards that have been set, and they are good standards, and this is a good process. It's a good process because it requires reflection on what we're doing well and where can we improve. But again, this work is being done by people who are going to be with us for 10 months.
They're leaving June 30th.
They're gone.
Right.
So I was stating it's a wonderful opportunity for somebody new to the district in this position to gather some real important information by going through this process and then developing an entry plan as to where this person wants to take the district in the future.
Right, makes sense.
But
But that would make sense.
Right.
So I just thought it was important to share with you. Again, it's a good process, it's an important process to go through, but
And I'm
it's
sure
gonna
Dr.
be-
Flynn has been through this before, so
She
I have,
has.
I have a tremendous confidence that she'll get it done, but at the same time, having it done by two interim people, it
Right.
just doesn't
Right.
probably make as much sense as it would to have someone permanent.
I
doing
think
it.
we'll be okay.
Okay,
I always want to be better than okay.
okay. Any other questions, comments on this?
Sometimes a B- is okay.
Yeah.
I know. It's hard, but I know.
Okay, before we close tonight, I know I'm going to screw this up, so I'm going to ask Mrs. Ericetti for assistance here. I wanted to congratulate her on something, but I'm probably going to congratulate her on the wrong thing. I think she completed her PhD requirements today, but why don't you explain it so
Yeah.
then when I congratulate you, I can congratulate you on the right thing?
Appropriately?
Yes.
You're gonna have to sit lower than me now.
I know.
Now.
Yeah, I'm going to have to move to the end.
Today, I successfully defended my dissertation. I had an oral defense and over like 2.5 hours of ruling. No, it wasn't that bad. David Trotman was there, he's on my committee, so I've completed all the requirements. I just have to do a little bit more writing to my manuscript, but everything else is done, so.
And what will that be,
I
a
will
PhD?
It's a DRPH, which
Oh,
is Doctorate in
DRPH.
Public Health, and they won't give it to me until May for some reason, but basically, it's,
You
just
can
a
bring it
piece
and
of
show it to
paper.
all of us?
I will.
Okay.
But it means that I'm done, and it's a significant chapter in my life, since it's been about 8 years that I've been in this
Wow.
program, working full-time and doing it. So the topic is on bullying and evaluating the Massachusetts anti-bullying law, which I concluded that is useless and we should get rid of. That is the summary of my research. I'm really very proud of the work that I've done, so.
Great.
And my husband and I are gonna get sleep for the first time in a long time, so.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Look forward to it.
Congratulations.
Jerry,
I would ask that you bring some documentation in May with you.
Yes.
Really?
And Jerry and I
So
were.
you can lower your chair just slightly?
Jerry and I were just hoping that we were just hoping that you didn't have to stay after school. We were concerned.
Oh.
You didn't have to stay after school or anything, right? You got everything?
I did stay after school for a little bit.
Okay.
That's
All right.
it.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much. Good night. Oh. Can we motion to adjourn?
Get on with
You
it.
want to see curling, don't you?
Why don't you make the motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night. I think I'm
Well,
losing my.
that's-